Well, hey there, Christine. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Confident Sober Women podcast. I am so excited to share you with my audience and talk about all things around creativity and sobriety. So I'm going to turn the mic over to you and let you share a little bit more about your story, and then we're going to talk.
Okay, thank you, Shelby. Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here, and I've been looking forward to this conversation. My name's Christine Soja, and we connected through She Recovers, which has been a really big part of my recovery journey as well. And one of the tenets of She Recovers is that we all create our own pathways and patchworks of recovery, which really resonates with me because that's been my experience. So I got sober. I quit drinking in 2018, but I think I was in recovery kind of definitely before that. And a big part for me of why kind of I can talk about what was leading up to what was going on in my life at that time, but I was a stay-at-home mom. I had two small kids, two boys, 2 years apart. And that is when my substance use really kind of uh, built up. It started to become a part of my like quote unquote self-care. And that was something that in the process of, it works until it doesn't work, right? And it was a big part of my socializing and a big part of my identity, really. Um, but I started to feel like I was lost. Like, where am I? Who am I anymore, even? I had this a few major life transitions, right? Putting a pause on my teaching career,
Mhm.
I got married the year before I got pregnant, had two small kids. I was like, who am I?
Mhm.
How did I get here? Who am I? What's going on? And what kind of helped me to, I feel like it was even just a thread that I was able to pull on. For me, it started out with writing. And I came across Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way, just kind of by chance, how these things happen, right? And I started writing daily. And in that writing, I kind of started to see where I was and who I was and what I was thinking about. And that started to kind of build into a creative practice that I still turn to today. And I teach today, and I can talk more about that too. But I think that the really important thing for me was creating some space and some time, even if it was 5 minutes, to just, the thing with Julia Cameron's morning pages, they're called, is that you write it out by hand, right? So it's like you're using your own hands and your own writing to just connect with yourself. And it kind of begins that dialogue. And coincidentally, if you believe in coincidence, right after I decided that I needed to step away from alcohol because it was, I wasn't feeling well. I was depressed, really, and knew that that was a factor. Like that was something I could do, was like eliminate alcohol and see how that goes. And I actually wrote a series of blog posts about what was kind of leading up to that, that folks can read if they want to. But I heard about this 100-day project. And it was a project on Instagram where you would pick some type of creativity, something, whatever you wanted to do, it was completely open, but you would share every day what you had done. And so as soon as I heard about that, I was like, ooh, I want to do that. I want to do that because I had been writing, but I really had this part of me that wanted to be an artist, say, or a visual artist, or play with colors and play with materials. And I was kind of a collector of these things, right? I had colored pencils and I had cool markers and I had these sketchbooks and I was like gathering all this stuff, but then I didn't really know what to do with it, right? There was kind of this gap between what I wanted to do, and what I knew how to do. And so the 100-day project, I started an Instagram account and I decided I wanted to do drawing because drawing was an area that I felt like was really beyond me, but
Mhm.
something that I thought was so cool when
Mhm.
somebody can render something on a page with just a pencil, right? Or a pen or something so
Mhm.
simple. Um, and I learned a lot in that challenge. I found a community of other people who were on the same kind of mission, even people locally in my neighborhood, which really surprised me. And I shocked myself by actually do completing the 100 days
Mm.
and not missing a day.
Wow.
And I traveled during that time. I did things. So it was also really important. I think something I learned there is how important it is to set yourself up with daily, realistic, achievable goals,
Mhm.
right? So it was like, I'm going to draw a picture from a magazine. I'm going to use this one notebook. I'm going to use this set of pens. I can take them with me wherever I'm going. I'm gonna spend 10 minutes on it, maybe less, right? And then I found that often it was like the last thing I would do before I went to bed at night would be like, I haven't done that thing yet, but I did it. And so I learned about myself too, like, that is something, these small daily actions create huge change, and that was something I could commit to. Because some people love to like sign up for a marathon, say, and that'll motivate me to get in shape to do it. But for me, these huge things just make me want to procrastinate and procrastinate and procrastinate, and it becomes this whole thing. So, yeah, that was kind of the intro for me to how to grow a skill, and connect with myself. And when I look back now at those, I had 100 drawings, right? Which is a body of work, really. Um,
A whole book.
yeah, and I did like pictures of people. And so now when I look at those pictures too, I can kind of see like parts of myself in them too, like why I was drawn to those particular images.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Christine, for sharing your story in that way. I really like so much of my all my neurons are firing as I was listening to you because I have like so much to say about all the things that you're saying. And so I want to try, I'm going to try to reel it in a little bit and make sure that we stay on track. But one of the things that first off I want to say is when you were talking about even when your drinking was ramping up, I mean, you're obviously a very busy mom. I get it. I think most of probably many of the women that are in our community are moms as well. And it's a lot. It's a busy time in a lot of ways, but there is like this huge identity shift that happens, and it's a very natural thing, right? You're going into mom, and mom is very selfless situation. It's a constant on 24/7 of giving, giving, giving. And you are and that doesn't mean that we can't do things for ourselves or that we shouldn't or we can't work or whatever, but there are things that we do put on the back burner when we decide to become a mom, if we want to do it well. And so we can't do everything. Now, like, of course, like you can work or you cannot work, or you can stay at home, or but you can't, like, we can't go after everything we would want because now we have these other people to think of. And so there's this major identity shift, which I think you touched on, and I really appreciate the questions that you found yourself kind of asking, like who am I now? Where do I want to go? Like, what is my life going to look like? What is my path? And I think that is where so many of us find ourselves, particularly after we stop drinking, and particularly even more so in that, like after that first year of sobriety. I really feel like that is the time of awakening. The brain is really, you're as sober as you're ever going to be. You've had enough time away where your body is healed. You've started to do some things, whether it's, AA or recovery work or whatever therapy, you've started to do some things to help yourself. And then usually around that 1 year mark, most of the people I talk to and then beyond, there is like this awakening of, okay, well, I want more. I want to do more. I'm looking for more, whether it's more recovery or more friends or more work. It's just more personal development. Um, so I love that for you. And then you found it in art.
Yeah, and you have You have your energy
Yeah.
returns. And
Yes.
then you also have this major readjustment with time,
Hmm.
right? There's all this time that you were spending thinking about drinking or being under the influence or all the things that go up with that. And when that goes away, there's this kind of like, what do I do with this now?
Hmm.
My evenings, I'm like
Hmm.
cogent and I can do stuff. And what do I want to do?
Yeah.
And I felt during that time when I was home too, because I knew I wouldn't be, I knew I would go back to work. And I also saw it as like, there's this opportunity to kind of figure out what this next chapter is
Mhm.
going to look like. But still also wanting to be present.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just the energy too, to have the energy to do all of
I
that.
agree with you. I agree about the energy and about the time. I remember back when I was like in very early recovery in treatment even, and we were doing some exercise. I can't remember what it was, but like it was something about losses. Like, what have you lost? And for me, my story, that part of my story was kind of boring. I mean, I had some other kind of big whatever like things, but I didn't really lost a lot of stuff. So I had to kind of go. I had to really dig deep for that. And the time was what I put as the top one. Like, and I think about that a lot. Like it was time lost. And it's not just like time that you were drinking or drunk. It's the time lost where you were so dysfunctional and like constantly thinking about drinking or thinking about numbing out or thinking about getting out of your life or thinking about how bad things are. Just that kind of like it was all the time. Right.
Mhm.
And so that's just a big loss. So I also really want to highlight, and this is, I think, where we're going to kind of go, is the fact that you found something for you. Obviously, the drawing was up your alley. Like you like art, and that was very your alley. But what you said was so important because um, you picked a thing.
Mhm.
You then you made it very accessible. You made
Mhm.
it extremely accessible. You had one book with these pencils at this time of day and this much time. And so you had very specific, it's like SMART goals, kind of like that
Mhm.
SM, like you had very specific and kind of measurable goals for this thing for you. And they weren't huge. You weren't doing it for 2 hours, like but you had like, so there was no real room for like, oh, well, now I'm going to be over here doing it on this piece of paper that's on my,
Yeah, or I
or
gotta go find the things. So part of it too is like leaving that out, having it, I'm not gonna put it away and take it out every day, right? It
no, it's
has to
like part of
be.
your routine. It's like part of your spot. Like my morning routine is in my spot. My book is there. My pad is there. So like I'm set up for success is my point. Like you set yourself up for success by having all of those things in place. And
Mhm.
then it was just really kind of up to you to execute. It was up to you to just show up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then what I've kind of learned since then, I think there were a couple things happening, which I wasn't aware of. My goal was just to get better at drawing. Or to participate in this group kind of project. But what I have learned more recently too is the role that dopamine plays in our addiction and in our seeking of the dopamine. And drawing or any really creative activity that you do with your hands, you get it's like a low dopamine activity,
Yeah.
right? You get a little burst. You get that sense of satisfaction that you did the thing. And while you're doing it, there's all the benefit going on too. But it's like I was getting, I was kind of healing my brain from the big surges of dopamine that alcohol was producing and getting these little daily doses. And also a refocus of my attention, right? So it's not just like, oh, it's the evening and I want to drink and I'm thinking about how I'm not and I'm thinking, it was like I got something else to think about.
Right.
And I think I really helped my brain to create some new pathways
Mhm.
in the repetition of that over the 100 days.
Right, you replaced it with something else.
Yeah.
And again, this is a part of that success path. You put all these things in place to set yourself up for success, and then the consistency of it. Why people I know there's research on this, I can't quote it, but like why there's so much good stuff about habits, right? And consistency is because it really does mean something. There
Mhm.
really is power in those things, and there's a discipline about it that changes our brain and makes us changes our neuroplasticity and helps us learn and then become accustomed to and routinized, right, in a different way.
Hmm.
So that like it's sort of like I got sober in AA, it's a similar thing, right? So in AA, like we talk about that, like doing the same things every single day over time it creates discipline. And generally speaking, people who use and abuse substances in the ways that we have are not disciplined. I thought I was because I was the athlete and I was this and I could control my food and I could do this, but that's not the kind of discipline that we're referring to. Like, yes, I can do that, but if you can, and if we can channel it into something that's going to end up being positive for you, but like we had to, I know I had to learn how to be consistently disciplined in that way. Also, I think this wasn't like you weren't necessarily, it's not like a parent, like you weren't following someone else's direction, like you have to do this, like this is a rule, but you did follow the plan. Like someone put this plan out and you agreed to it. And so then you followed the plan, right? So it's like, yeah, you're kind of following the rule. And it takes a lot for us, like to be able to say, I need to be disciplined. I need to change. I need to learn how to follow directions.
Hmm. And I'd say directions that I created myself. I mean, there was the 100 day, like just do something for 100 days.
Sure.
Because I know in myself too, if someone tells me what to do, that like triggers this rebellious part of myself who's like, you can't tell me what to do, right? So it was open enough too, where it was like, this, here's the framework, but I get to decide what the thing is that I want to do. And I think that piece is really important. And it was something that I legitimately wanted to increase my ability, increase my skill at doing. And I had a buy-in in that way too, right? It was something that I,
Mhm.
I really sincerely wanted, and I enjoyed the process
Yeah.
also.
And then just the beauty of it for you was that it did help replace your alcohol. It's filled the time slot
Mhm.
of where you were normally drinking. And so it just helped to support your goal of drinking less or not drinking at all by giving you something else to focus on. And especially in those moments when you probably really did want to drink. I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about what you discovered, like if you could chunk it in periods of time, 100 days is a long time. But like in the first 25, 50, like as you went along, I'm just curious what else you discovered about yourself, like what you started to notice emotionally. Like what did you start to notice changing, or did you notice anything like maybe in your thought patterns or the way you were carrying yourself or the way you were behaving or interacting with other people that you probably didn't even know was really, maybe it wasn't even related to the 100-day thing, but but in that time period, like when you were doing that activity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think a couple things come to mind. As I continued to do it and follow through on what I said I was going to do, which, like I said from the beginning, I was kind of shocked at the end that I actually did it, to
Yeah.
your point on discipline, right?
Right.
Um, but I gained confidence in my ability to show up for myself,
Mm-hmm.
which I think really helped to just fuel my sense of myself and like, oh, here I am, right? That was my initial kind of crisis, was like, where am I? Who am I? Where have I gone?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to create these pieces and this work and really set aside this time for myself, that I started to see myself like proof of my own life, right? Here on this paper. Um, and then the other things that were surprising was, like I mentioned earlier, like community that popped up around this project and connecting with people just in my neighborhood, even people I didn't even know were interested in this kind of thing or wanted to do this. And so it also really helped to open up my mind to how much is out there that I don't know. Right. And because you kind of can get into this groove where you're like, you think you know how everything's going to play out. You think you know what your options are. You think, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, whoa, it's just that whole the surprise element, I
Oh,
think, of how much is out there and how many, and a new way to relate to people too, because I had been, drinking was a big part of my social life too. So this was, now I was able to relate to people around our creativity and around their cool projects and my project and seeing each
mm-hmm.
other. And even actually seeing people who I had known before, but who also participated in the project to see their work
Mm,
is like to see a different side of someone, right? And to
yeah.
get to know somebody in a different way.
Yeah.
Was really, really cool.
I love that. So what you started to notice was that you felt more confident, and I'm gonna guess that maybe like you could even feel that in your body. Like you could show like that you were standing, your posture was different, like you felt more present or available like when you were socializing, And then it sounds like even maybe you felt, you didn't use this word, but it sounds to me like it felt like more interesting, like you had more to offer in a conversation, or
Mhm.
like you could be somebody that could contribute and socially, which is really cool too.
And I
Um,
think being kind of a shy person,
mhm,
which I think is also why alcohol, in social situations felt so necessary.
mhm,
And because I was sharing this publicly, people would see things. People would see my work and they would come up to me and they'd be like, "Oh, I love, I really enjoy seeing what you're going to come up with every day or this and that." And so it also allowed me to show a part of myself
mhm.
that that other people they wouldn't know about
Right.
if I didn't put it out there. And I got to tell you, the first day that I shared my drawing publicly like that, even though I just started an Instagram account, I didn't have any like followers. There was no, I was trembling, pushing like, share on that
Right.
at that moment. Was like, I really had this feeling of like, I'm outing myself here as like a creative person or someone who likes to make art. It felt so scary.
Right.
Um, and then I also got used to doing that because every day for 100 days, you just get used to something like that.
What was scary about it?
I felt exposed
Hmm.
in a way and vulnerable
Vulnerable.
because I know people can be so, I mean, I can judgmental about art or what is art, right? Which is another whole nother topic that I really try to break down for people, this like art with a capital A as this very important thing that only important people get to do and goes in a gallery and this really kind of um out of out of reach thing that being an artist is to like the lowercase art, like whatever you create,
Mhm.
it's an outfit, right?
Yeah.
It's how you arrange your room. It's how
Mhm.
you put food on a plate. Whatever is like, that's something you did.
Yeah.
And that is your art and it's valuable.
It is valuable. And what's hard when we decide to become public, because not everybody wants to do that and not everyone has to. It's kind of like if you're into journaling or writing, not everybody is made to like publish a book or to post those kinds of things in a blog for the world to see. Now, some people choose to do it and then we consume it and we're like, wow, I love this. This is so cool. Or stories just like mine. But maybe you're not really the kind of person that wants to share in that way. And it's totally fine. Like, but when we do decide to do that, um, people will have opinion, whether you hear it or not, whether they share it with you or not, they are going to have an opinion. So, and sometimes, unfortunately, because of social media and just public spaces, we are exposed to that. We see the comments. There are people that don't like it or don't like us or disagree or whatever. And so then when we become public with our story or with our work of any kind, it is a vulnerable experience of exposure and opening up to, that kind of criticism. On the flip side, it's also the opportunity and exposure for very positive feedback.
Oh,
So
100%.
both things can be true. And both things I think, do something for us. They're actually not both bad, even though they feel bad sometimes.
I mean,
Um,
it's the practice of owning who you are too.
right,
I made this. Some people might like it, some people might not like it. It's really none
right,
of my business, right?
right.
My business is just to do what's in my heart,
Exactly.
to create that. And then you're right. If you want to share it or not share it, it really doesn't matter. The point is the process of the creation. And I think of following through on your creative impulses.
Hmm.
I mean, I think an artist really is just somebody who follows through on those creative impulses. And
And I think we talked the last time when we were together about the creativity looks like a lot of things, like cooking is creative.
yeah.
Putting an outfit together is creative. Like, there's a lot of things I think most of us, when we hear the word creativity, we go right to art, right? Like that capital A or the traditional kinds of art things. But how we express ourselves creatively, it can look very, very, very different and interesting. So, that kind of leads me right into what I would love to ask you too, is like, how are you kind of using this now in a way to serve others? Like how do you teach people what do you teach? Do you teach them to do this, or are you trying to help them with a specific attribute like confidence or thinking patterns, or what's your shtick on that?
Yeah, yeah. I do a bunch of different things because like you said too, some people the word creativity, they're like, that's not me. I'm not creative. And I know that's not true, but I think that I do a few different things. I do teach some classes, some online classes on art journaling and ways to use art materials for expression. Um, and that too, the art journaling is something that my initial practice has kind of morphed into. And
Okay.
that is something that you don't share with people, right? That's something that's like a ritual, a habit of just expressing yourself to check in with yourself. So I teach people how to do that. I created a 7 day challenge for folks who are curious about this, in any way. And it's free, so there's nothing to lose. And it's basically just using the most basic supply of paper and pencil or pen if you want to, but two things. And I send an email every day for a week with a short instruction. It's like a 5 minute to kind of try and really in this case we use the pencil and the paper to connect with ourselves. So I share a little exercise in each day, and then at the very end it's like, okay, now you've kind of got this momentum. Where would you like to take it? And where's your curiosity? Because I think ultimately creativity is connecting with our intuition, right? And that can always serve us, right? My intuition was that little voice that was like, is this drinking thing really helping you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And taking the leap of faith to follow the intuition, to hear your intuition and to
Mm-hmm.
follow it. And then I think also in the creative process, oftentimes straight away our critic appears, right? The critic can be very accessible in a creative process. And so you also get that practice of like, okay, I hear you and I'm going to do this anyway, right? I
Mm-hmm.
hear you saying that this is silly and stupid and I should stop, but I'm not, I'm going to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe, we're integrated beings, right? So I think whatever we work on in one area, it feeds the rest of our system. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that having a practice can serve us in so many other ways. And when we kind of it's like priming the creative pump, right? We can get that flow going.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately creativity is about problem solving too. And sobriety is about problem solving. Like I have,
Yeah.
you know, I gotta I want to live in a new way. And how am I gonna do that?
Yeah.
And that's where the idea of like the patchwork and the pathways, right? Is like a pulling in of
Mm.
what am I curious about and what do I need right now? And how do I follow through on that?
Yeah, I love that so much because, and when we're working with others, when you and I as professionals are working with others, or anybody, if you're just, with a friend or your kids or whatever, these are the kinds of things that do come up. Like you used a lot of words like getting curious, you use the word intuition, pathways, personal development, and I like what I was hearing at the end there about how you're making the connection really between sobriety, but also just personal development and growth in general, and this creative outlet slash program or whatever you're doing. There is a connection there, right? Because sometimes it's very, I guess what I'm saying is it's challenging sometimes to see. um those sometimes for me too, like it's challenging to see like the emotional parts, like the emotional development parts of a thing you might be doing outside of the program. Like,
Right.
I'm
Right.
taking this cooking class. It's 6 weeks long. I'm going to learn how to make fondant cakes. I'm making this
Right.
up, right? Like, I decided I wanted to bake more, and I'm going to learn how to make fondant cakes. Cool, cool. So, like, I'm doing this. I show up, and our logic brains take over. And for most of us, even if you're a creative, if you're somebody who struggles with substances, we work in a certain kind of way. We don't like to be told what to do or controlled and all these things. So, but like, I'm doing this baking class, and I'm going to learn how to bake. But what's the unsaid part of it and what's not being talked about is what all the things that are going on and running in the background while you're taking that 6 week class.
Mm.
Like, you show up there and they say, here's the materials, and you get to do like either maybe it's scripted, like whatever it is, you get to do what you want with this. And so now you're like, oh gosh, you're like getting curious. And then there's like a little bit of listening. You call it intuition. It could be spirituality, it could be a lot, like whatever that is for somebody. How are you getting to that? How are you accessing that part of yourself?
Right.
Um, to say, oh, you should make a fondant cat. Cool.
Mhm.
Okay, cool. And then the other emotional pieces along the way through the development process of like yes, we all have many parts inside of us, right? All that good IFS work. And so like that critic part shows up and it's like, you can't bake cakes. What are you doing here?
Mhm.
This is ridiculous. Like you can't even bake cookie. Why would you take this class? But then we have like the protector part that's like, that's ridiculous. She can do what she wants. She's an adult. And then we have that little insecure child part that's like saying, "Ooh, I just want if I do it, then maybe you'll love me." You
Mhm.
know. Um, so I guess that was like very clinical, I guess, but just trying to say like we're not always thinking at the existential level like that to see how these kinds of things are actually happening simultaneously until
Yeah.
someone points it out to us.
Right. Right.
That,
And it's a chance to I did my life coach training with Martha Beck,
hmm,
and she says how we do anything is how we do everything,
hmm,
which is like, so you can kind of look at it at this like microcosm,
mhm,
right? And the thing, like making the cake, who cares really ultimately if we make a cake, or like the stakes are low, right? Who cares if I scribble on this paper? It doesn't matter. But it's we get to observe ourselves in this low stakes
mhm,
process, and just like you said, those parts pop up
mhm,
and we get to work through them.
mhm,
um and then also there's just that we have an opportunity kind of to access a flow too, really, right? And to tune in, to just to be present. I think creative acts require presence. And so there's the practice of that. There's the practice of like, all this is going on. All these parts are doing their things. And here I am continuing on,
mhm,
putting my pencil on the paper, you know, making the fondant cat. I'm here. This is me, right? This is kind of my true self who is doing this amidst, it's the practice of doing this amidst all of the other things that are going on.
right. Exactly. And what you said is so true. Like any of these things that we're doing, unless you are like on a contract with some giant agent or something that's paying you millions of dollars to create the fondant cat cake, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Now it matters because it
Mhm.
matters to you,
Right.
but like only in that I want to do a good job or I want people to like it. Um, I think this is so valuable. What just was popping up for me while I was listening to you is the piece around confidence, because our show's called Confidence Over Women, and like that's a big part of I think the work we do when we start building emotional sobriety. And oftentimes people will say, or sometimes I even think, this many like, what does that even mean? Like, what do we mean confidence? Or like, how do we build confidence? Like I'm not a mental health therapist too. Like I'm like, I don't even know. I don't. But then I'm reminded, I'm like, I do know. But like sometimes I find it hard to like put that into words or put my finger on it. But then I'm reminded of something like this, which is this very exact thing. How we do it is by like what you said earlier is you just do it anyway. So we show up in the thing, whether it's you're starting a health journey or you want to start getting fit at the gym, or you're trying to be creative with art or with food or with essential oils or whatever you like. We just keep doing it, like, and so where the like where you start to see the shift is really that neural pathway changing. If you want to get into the neuroscience, it's the neural pathway changing of something done consistently over time, every single day. We don't deviate over time, like long time, is then those parts that show up are still there. You're still doing it anyway. I mean, in the beginning, it's ugly, right? You're like, oh man, like I don't like this. Like
Mhm.
just like hitting the share, like I don't want to do it. And then, but then like the next time, you're like, okay, well, it wasn't really that bad actually last time. And even if it was, you can kind of work through it. You're like, oh, okay, I can do it. And then but it's just doing that over and over and over again. It just changes you. It changes you these tiny micro bits. Like you start to feel like, like I'm okay. Like I'm okay. I,
Yeah, and I'm the reason I'm doing this is because I want to.
hold on one second.
This
Hold
is
on one second. Hold on. My laptop is telling me that it's like not charging, even though my charger is plugged in. And that's super annoying. I don't know what is happening with that. I just don't want it to like cut off while we're like
no.
talking. I'm like, okay, you're plugged in. I don't know. Okay. Sorry, carry on.
Okay.
I'll fix that. I'll fix
Um,
it.
yeah, no. I think so on the thinking about confidence, right? And building that, it comes from experience, right?
Right.
And when we follow through on these things that it's following through on something that we want to do. It might not make sense to other people. Other people might think it's stupid or a waste of time, but there's something in me. I'm like, I'm doing this for me. And so I think that's where the confidence grows in that I got my back. I'm gonna, I have a million other responsibilities, but I'm also gonna make time for me because I am valuable and it's worth it. And I want to. And that's enough. That's enough of a reason why.
Exactly. And that's why, I mean, and this might be weeks, months, years, decades for some people, right? This process is, and I think we're always doing, once we're set on the path, we're always going to be doing it from now on. Like we are always going to be the kind of people, once we learn, that are going to be on that pathway of confidence and to the kind of personal development or change. But the process really is lengthy. This is not something that's going to be overnight or even weeks, months, sometimes many months or years. And exactly that. It's just that continuously doing over and over until yours find yourself like, well, I'm doing this, like and almost to the point where I like it, or you've learned to talk to those other parts and say no thank you, critic, I actually don't need you here anymore. Like there are parts of us that do need the critic for a while, right? Because that's what we're used to, like as if we were growing up in a very critical environment, or we were used to always having to kind of defend ourselves, or we weren't listened to, or whatever. Like that critic is what we know. So it's comfortable for a while, and then until we learn like, oh, actually I don't really need you, I'm good, like I got this,
Yeah.
and like
Like
you
it might
and
be
your
trying
more
to
confident part shows up, and like now you're in charge.
Yeah, it might be trying to protect you,
Yeah.
right? From embarrassment or to protect you from
Mhm.
criticism or something.
Exactly.
But I am learning that I can handle that.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's that window of tolerance just widening up, right? It's like all of a sudden now, over those weeks, months, years, you're learning like, yeah, even though I'm feeling anxious about this conversation with my partner, I know I can handle it.
Mhm.
Even though I'm feeling um frustrated by this work situation, I know how to take care of myself.
Right.
And so that's the gift and the blessing that comes on the other side when we find practices in our life that are done consistently over time that lead us to begin to trust ourselves. Trust is a big part of this too, and I don't know, we didn't use that
Mhm.
word yet, but our brain does learn to trust ourselves when we do what we say we're going to do. So that's
Right.
why that 100-day activity or anything like that is also really good, because when you consistently do show up because you said you were, your brain eventually, after whatever 21 days or whatever the new rules
Right.
are, will say, "Oh, actually, Christine does do what she says she's going to do. Like
Yeah,
she is going to get up earlier at 5:30 to go to the gym because she always does what she says."
right.
Whereas before, if you're a snooze button hitter for your whole life, every time you go to do that, they're like, "Yeah, she's not going to do that. She's not going to do that. She doesn't do what she says she's going to do." So it's part of building trust through these kinds of activities repetitively done that then lead to that confidence because then you're
Yeah,
like, oh, I'm okay, like I know, my brain knows I always do what I say. And then also when these things come up, when the comment shows up and it's like your work sucks, and you're like, you know what, you get to feel that way, like you
mhm,
get to, like
yeah,
you're everyone's allowed to have their feelings. And
right,
instead of taking it on and sort of putting it on and being like, you're right, you're totally right, like, I should have, I've never done that. Like I'm a terrible artist. Instead of putting it on, you can just like let it be there. You can like let them have that feeling, right? And be like, yeah,
right,
yeah,
right. And that's why it's so important to set yourself up for success with a tiny, teeny, tiny
yes,
baby step. And that's why I said too, I was shocked at the end of the first 100 days that I did it.
yes.
I didn't know, but I had to kind of
Hmm.
trust. And then it also starts to build its own momentum.
Hmm.
For some part of you, like, is like, aren't we going to do that thing? Aren't we
Yeah.
going to do it? Like and I think that's a young part too. That's like, that's fun. I want to do that. Are we going to do it? Are we going to do it?
Well, it also, yeah, it starts to create that part, and then also just it creates a predictability. That's why like people talk about the morning routine being so important because then your brain begins to know like it's predictable. Like every morning I get up and I sit in this chair and we read this book and I have my coffee and it's very nice and my dogs are there. Like, and then even though your day might be crap and you have the worst stuff going on ever, like you go to bed and knowing like, okay, tomorrow I get to do that thing again. And it's such a small thing. These are
Yeah.
small. It's not hours of spa treatments, and those are nice too, but these tiny things can do the job.
Yeah. And in that way too, you're not putting it off into the future. Like when I have more time,
Right.
when I have this or that,
Right.
when this thing is done, then I'll get to that. It's like
Right.
we got to figure out a way to start it today.
Yeah.
And that's why I mean, 3 minutes of something,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I know, and I think for again, I think it's a characteristic of people who struggle with substances is just like it has to be done immediately. It has to be done in this specific way, and if it's not, it's your failure or why bother? I think that's the style that a lot of us have, that personality, and it's mine's always like it's got to be bigger, better, bolder, faster. Instead of being like pump the brakes. Actually, 3 minutes of meditation is great if you do it every single day.
Yeah,
That's enough.
exactly. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, where you mentioned your challenge, so I want everybody to be able to go find that. Where do you like people to reach out to you if they want to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so I have a website. My business is called Alchemy Recovery, um,
Mm-hmm.
and alchemy-recovery.net is
Mm-hmm.
my website.
Okay.
And they can find the challenge there. And also, I've written some blogs and some work about my coaching programs. And so now I actually do a 100-day sobriety challenge,
Mm.
which I started last year, which is really
Awesome.
fun. And we have a small group coaching and then a daily email from me with a little bite-sized sobriety support.
I love it.
Um, and that's been really fun too. So I'll probably do that like at 4 times a year. We're
Mhm.
about a quarter of the way through our winter challenge, but we'll be doing another one in the spring.
Awesome. I'll make sure I link to those in the show notes below so everybody can find you. I thank you so much for your time, Christine. This has been very, very powerful. I love the connections we were making. I mean, and sometimes we don't even know that's what's going to happen. And and it's very organic. And one of the reasons why I love having these conversations, because there's just so much for each one of us to take away from it. And I know my audience is going to love it. So thank you again so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.